Projecting. I'm just projecting. I'll project. I'm only talking for a second. Thank you for being here. Let me, before I forget, make a program note to the faculty who have joined us on the live stream. Thank you for being present as well. And I wanted to share that we don't have a way to ask questions over the live stream, but if you would like to ask a question in the course of AR's talk, please email Jackie Wolf. That's jackie.wolf@ou.edu. She's going to be monitoring her phone and should be able to ask questions on your behalf. So if you're watching the live stream, you have a question, email Jackie and she will ask it for you. So let me just very briefly offer a few words of welcome and introduction to Dr. Anshuman Rajdan. We're very pleased to welcome him to our campus as a candidate for the position of Vice President for Research. He is a PhD in computer science from Arizona State, where he was on the faculty and in the administration for a number of years. He is himself an accomplished researcher who's been the principal investigator on grants from over half a dozen agencies. He's been a tremendous leader throughout his career in higher education, and 3 years ago he moved to the University of Delaware, where he serves in the position of Associate Vice President for Research Development, as well as, again, professor in the Department of Computer and Information Sciences. At Delaware, he's been instrumental in growing the research profile of a major flagship public institution that has, in many ways, parallels to the University of Oklahoma. He's been very successful building collaborations as well as putting together partnerships between the private sector, the federal government, and the university. So I'll let him share with us his vision for what's possible at the University of Oklahoma. We've asked him to start with a discussion prompted by the following question. So Interim President Harris has recently cited one of his top priorities is to continue to define and pursue a new level of excellence and impact in research and creative activity. Please talk us through how you would achieve that priority and gain buy-in from the university community. So that is his prompt. Please join me in giving a very warm OU welcome to Dr. Anshuman Rajdan.
Am I live? Thank you, Provost Kyle, for the nice introduction. And I go by AR. It's a lot easier than Anshuman Rajdan, so I'm universally recognized, and that's my signature in my email as well. So thank you for the opportunity and coming to the talk. As Provost said, that was the sort of the defining question to set the context for my talk today. So I'll probably walk fast through some of the ideas and philosophies that I have towards research and scholarship, and hopefully you'll bear the talk with some sense of humor that is personal to me, and hopefully you'll indulge me in that sense of humor. So I have served under in different institutions with demands of, it's not unique, where universities, research-oriented universities like OU want to enhance scholarship and research funding. This doesn't work with children and this doesn't work with faculty. So that's not a way to, okay, I didn't know whether the animation's working or not, to achieve that goal. I'm going to start with laying down sort of the mission of higher education, and all of you are part of it, but I thought I would set the context so that we are on the same page as I give my talk. And I take the thing in the parentheses very seriously, using other people's money, which is we are public institutions funded by taxpayer dollars. That's serious obligation we have to make sure that the mission of higher ed lives up to its worth. So what is it that's asked of us in a higher education? Two things: scholarship and create knowledge, and then disseminate that knowledge. How we do that is because faculty are lifelong scholars. If you stop being a scholar in your discipline, then you're not contributing to the creative aspect of your discipline. And that by default, I think that you stop really being that core definition of a faculty, not by title, but so that's a definition I use of a faculty being a lifelong scholar teacher. And then our scholarship is to discover, innovate, and educate and train, right? That's what we do. That's part of our charge. And how do we disseminate the knowledge? We train our undergraduate and graduate students. We create a workforce that goes out in the industry, state, other nonprofits to work in the outside community. We publish in scholarly venues. That's another expression of our scholarship and dissemination of knowledge. And nowadays, popular press and social media has become just as important. Then we have, honors in our own societies, in our own disciplines, in our own communities. Some of us are lucky to have sponsorship to sustain our scholarship. That's where extramural funding comes into play. And that could be for innovation or education. There is the commercialization, the economic impact, foundations and philanthropy. There are ways to connect scholarship to that. Then there is outreach, social impact, and societal embeddedness. That's a very important aspect of the mission of a higher education. We are using the other people's money. That's a part of our mission, to give back to the society and make an impact. But all of these things collectively help in branding the institution, which is very important. And the research office, I highlighted a few green things, is generally where a research office can play a significant role. It can play a role in other aspects of it as well, but that's the 4 areas where I see the research office having a significant impact within the institution. So I really like this quote from Richard Florida. Again, I don't want to sound like an elitist, but we are the creative class in the society. Whether you are from law, fine arts, science, engineer, we are the creative class. We are the class that comes up with ideas to move society forward. And that if you are part of that profession, then you are a member of this class, and we are all members of this class. And it bears on all of us to advance scholarship in our discipline, no matter what the discipline is. So on one hand, we have the research scholarship, excellence and impact. We need to combine that with opportunities and challenges, and I put the grand challenges that are facing the society, whether it is the environment, whether it's the climate, whether it's the ethics, whether it's the humanities, or fine arts. It does not matter. We have to embrace those challenges as opportunities. And then there are always institutional constraints, whether they're academic or infrastructure or a variety of things. So we have to overcome these barriers, accept these challenges, so that we can really exert excellence and impact with research scholarship. So this is my research philosophy. I have 3 distinct things. One is think big and broadly. So you got to think above and beyond how my discipline or even a collection of interdisciplinary work is impacting the institution, but in a big way. So the big picture is always important. Cannot forget the societal embeddedness and the impact one has economically, socially, in the local, regional, and even global community. Your work can have far-reaching impact. Somebody working on water issues here in Oklahoma or Delaware can inform people in Papua New Guinea, which is an island or set of islands with very low water resources. And then I think in this day and age, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. There is not many grand challenges that you can say, in fact, none, I would argue, that you can say only a singular discipline can solve those challenges. So collaboration in every sense of the way is very, very important. So what I claim as a formula for success is that we need two essential elements: ideation and scaffolding. What do I mean by that? So faculty are responsible for ideation. Nobody else can do what you can do as a faculty because you are the expert in that sub discipline of your field. Okay? The provost can't do it, the VPR can't do it, the president can't do it, the dean, chair, nobody else can do it. You are the person who's responsible for that ideation and that creativity. Everything else is an institution responsible for providing that scaffolding to help you build that building of idea and execute your ideas and bring it to fruition and do all those things, dream big, have a social impact, economic impact, research impact. So I seriously believe in this partnership. And by the way, let me just say that we often call the Office of Research or Research Office. No research actually happens in this office. It's really Research Facilitation Office, we should call them. And that, speaks to this part. So whether it is the president, provost, administrative support staff, VPR, we are all part of this scaffolding where we need to work to make your ideas come to fruition. That's a critical part of my philosophy. So I kind of took it from the Toy Story, but our responsibility is to go from the ideation to submission of that ideation to execution and take it beyond. And beyond is not defined. So with respect to the objectives that I see a research office, some of the critical elements are, obviously advance the research enterprise and serve faculty and researchers. But the bottom left bullet, aspire in accordance with each unit and college's leadership and the goals and objectives that they have defined critical to their success. So you cannot take the metrics and the measures of geography, engineering, and fine arts and cast them in the same way. I think that's a critical mistake that institutions make, VPRs make, by having one set of metrics in measuring scholarship and success, and that leads to a lot of issues. And do it in a way that's transparent. Anyway, facilitate new strengths, enable partnerships, and promote creative endeavors. And part of this is to also help communicate the success and the institution that helps branding of the institution externally. And by the way, a VPR only has carrots, if the provost and the president allows them. Versus, the typical hierarchical structure where you have the chair, dean. The VPR has very little influence with respect to, the faculty's promotion and tenure and all the other aspects. The way I've found it to be most successful sitting in the research office is with incentivizing faculty. So I've kind of come up with my own term of a SWOT analysis, and I call it capabilities, capacities, and aspirations. As an institution, we have to look at what are our current capabilities and capacities, but more importantly, what are our aspirations, and how our current capabilities and capacities are going to lead to our aspirations. And the aspirations institutionally are one thing, and for each unit, they are different. And you have to work with each unit leadership to define how to go about achieving that. So there are external elements to look at it. Then there are internal things to look at it. So we look at our current capabilities and capacities, map your aspirations, and work with the provost office and the unit leaders to see where critical hiring needs to happen to achieve the goals that we are talking about in terms of scholarship and research. And this is one of my favorite soapbox peeves that, as institutions of higher education, not one university, not to pick on any one, collectively, we have failed in our mission. We do not do enough mentoring compared to, say, in a private enterprise where you recognize leaders early on with different strengths and capabilities, and then you groom them, you invest in them, you promote them. But generally speaking, now some departments may do it differently, but typically it's like golf. It's individual achievement, right? That's fundamentally how we have, the academe has constructed the P&T structure. But once you reach a certain threshold, like the post-tenure, there is very little mentoring and research leadership growth. I just started talking to a senior faculty in business who has done a lot of organizational psychology, has worked in, and I'm kind of using him as my leadership coach. And it's very fascinating. And one of the things I said to him in the last meeting is like, nobody has ever talked to me like, the conversation we are having about communication, about leadership aspects, about motivating, because when you are running a center or your lab or whatever, everybody is on the same page. You get to hire the people that you want to hire, and you're driven by this common purpose, and a lot of it is driven by your research grants and sink or survival and so on and so forth. We never developed certain aspects that are necessary from a leadership perspective in general, but how to lead a group of faculty for a research center type of a proposal, where you have to learn how to put your own ego and your own achievements a little bit in the back and organize and keep a successful team together. It's not easy. It comes intuitively to some folks, but we should actively work in identifying and growing leadership within the institution. It's very, very important. So I don't want you to read the whole thing, just focus on the orange stuff, that the research office has to be service-oriented, and the sole mission is to increase the institution's or faculty's competitiveness. It is a dog-eat-dog world outside. We want to help our faculty compete as best as possible, right? In whatever forms of expression it may be. So I'll quickly talk about, generally you start with what your university brand is, your program strengths. You always have some pockets of excellence. And you figure out how to build those relationships with federal and state agencies and industry. And it's always a square peg in a round hole, right? Nobody has a problem that's defined by exactly their strength. In fact, my approach is the opposite. I want to listen to the program officers. I want to listen to the industry leaders and hear what their problem is, come back and figure out how can I dissect that, use our assets, our knowledge assets that we have, and position them in a way that they would deliver what the outside world needs, while at the same time promoting research and scholarship and driving the academic excellence that has to be the core of any R1 university. So internally, I'll just quickly, I won't go down into each one of them, but promoting faculty's, competitiveness by seed grants. One of the things I've done successfully at UD is organize what I call as thematic symposia. So things in data science related to water. So it's not just civil engineering or earth ocean or geography that comes to that. It's open to university-wide. So people from ethics and humanities come to the water workshop and learn how maybe they can connect with their counterparts in engineering or in other sciences. Obviously, the research administration, connecting faculty with opportunities, being their champion outside. Communication, innovation, tech transfer, and research development. Research development is an office that I lead, and this is a relatively new phenomena where you want to make some investments into your faculty so that you are competitive, and it's more than just grant writing help. It's a bigger and deeper set of things that one has to do. Okay, so VPR roles, again, it's a bag of tricks one has to have to do that, but at the end of the day, success enabler. That's how I measure my productivity or my impact in an institution. So I thought I'd take a couple of minutes to talk about sponsored research growth strategies, sort of an analytical view. Can't help being an engineer. So I took a hypothetical university. Oh, before I do that. So this is not how world works. And the second quote is actually somebody said that to me one time, that why don't we write proposals that win? Obviously, they didn't know how the research enterprise worked. So here is a graph of awards with funding on one side and the faculty. These are just number of faculty going from on the x-axis. And this graph is not unique to any university. It is pretty much, you can go from MIT to Stanford to Delaware to Oklahoma. This is a graph you will find very similar to that. So there's always a small section of faculty that are bringing a lot of awards, and then there's an exponential drop and a plateau and so on and so forth. Let me expand that, zoom into that so the outliers are taken off, and this is what the graph looks like. This is my hand-drawn sketch of that graph. So this area is what I call as the super athletes. A VPR's role is generally to polish their stars, get out of their way, say, how can I deliver your bags? What else do you need to be successful, right? So they also require big investments and have a low hit rate. So you have to be cognizant of that and careful of where you make those investments. The second group are what I call as the rising stars. They require some mentoring and support to really become those super athletes. They are capable of managing teams. They have proven it. They have one or more $2 to $5 million initiatives. They require significant but not big investments. You have to believe that some of that is lost leadership here, and they're also highest retention risk. So this is where you have to work with a provost and the academic part of it to make sure that the investments you're making in those faculty are going to be returning back to your institution, not to some other institution. This is what I call as the middle class. These are faculty who are successful in single 2 PI type of proposals. They bring a bulk of funding as a category, but they are stuck. Either there is no incentive to expand into a one to the left. They need some incentive and motivation, or they may not grow. This is where the research leadership comes into play, how to grow. And even some moderate investments and incentives can have a huge increase in the ROI of this category. And then there is the tail, and it's really built up of two categories of faculty. They're junior faculty. They don't have funding to show because they are being groomed. They're writing lots of proposals. But then there is always a section that's disengaged from research, or they're passionate about teaching, and there is nothing wrong with that. You just have to recognize that. You also have to recognize that junior faculty require a special kind of TLC. You can't just throw them with the rest of the bunch. And they require different kind of specific investment to make them successful. And we owe it to them to be successful. If we have hired them into our institution, we want them to be successful. So with those kind of investments, you can move the blue curve to the brown curve, right? This is where the tangible payoff is. And the intangible payoff, when I say intangible, it's a small increase in funding perhaps, but what you're doing is imparting a culture to junior faculty, providing them support to be successful later on in their careers to shift to this mode. And if you did a Riemann sum of the area under the curves, you'll see that the brown curve is twice the area. So there you go. You can double your research funding. It's not as simple as that, but algorithmically it works. So how to have adapt the culture for excellence and impact. So the first is messaging. Right from the president, provost, and all the unit leaders, including VPR, we have to have a consistent message. Consistency is very important, shifting priorities. I was a faculty once, people will say, we'll hide under our desk and let this administration pass. So that's not the kind of culture we want to promote. Work with Senate and faculty representation and convince them of good ideas versus good intentions. It's very, very important, and I've worked hard with our Faculty Research Council that's part of the Senate to make some changes there. Also, good ideas must be celebrated and supported more than words. So we need to invest some resources if we want the outcome to be different than before. And we have to figure out a differentiated set of support. I don't mean just small to big, but the kind of support is different from junior faculty to senior faculty and across the disciplines. And I go back to one of the favorite things about growing leadership is also mentoring. So mentoring and collaboration and working with the provost and academic leaders to say that mentoring is really important, that it should be considered part of the university service. I've had my challenges talking to that side of the thing. Some departments do it well. So I always I was talking to the vice provost for faculty affairs, and he said, great idea. We'll make a motion in the Senate, and it'll be in handbook. And I said, after I'm dead. So we cannot, so I've found ways, sometimes, as I was explaining to the faculty groups, like $20 Starbucks card to convince people or acknowledge their mentoring and service in the research office because it's not recognized as a university service. It's very important. And finally, AR adapts to OU culture, not OU culture adapts to AR. We have to, adapt to each other and bring good ideas and convince you that that's the path forward together. So I'll briefly go over some of the key initiatives. And I want to clarify that, I'm not a PI of any proposals anymore sitting in the research office, but I work with a lot of creative faculty. So we have had, the last 3 years, great success with 2 of the manufacturing institutes. One we lead, one we kind of lead. The Rapid, second one. We just got a NSF Track 1 EP score. That was $23 million, $20 million from NSF, $4 million from the state. We have just renewed our CTR in Embry because we are also an IDEA state, an EP score state like Oklahoma. EFRC renewal, that's a DOE. A couple of Track 2 EP score proposals. Several MRIs, these are major research instrumentation. And 2, the one with the asterisk, they are coming, but they're not formally. one with the asterisk, we did not win, but this is a different kind of, each one of them requires a customized effort in going after some of the bigger funding opportunities. So like I said, thematic workshops is bringing faculty together from diverse disciplines, but under a theme. The data science led to establishment of a data science institute. Giving free grant development resources to faculty. I worked with the research deans to share the burden, split the cost of faculty who have not been successful. So they get 20 hours of grant editing support and 5 hours of graphic artist to help them. The GUR funding, which is specifically for humanities and the arts, used to have a budget of $6K. I convinced the Research Council to raise the budget to $15K, but instead of funding 28 out of 30 proposals, fund 12. So it's the same amount of money distributed, but more of competition and not taken as a sustenance mechanism, but then provide other resources as a ramp to go after extramural funding. So our seed grants have increased now to about, ROI of about $22, $23 to every dollar we invest. And then I launched 2 academies for junior faculty. It's a year-long program, and it takes them with a mentor, again, grant editing, and then a structure where they have to write a proposal that gets reviewed before they submit it to the agency over years. So we are starting applications for the NIH one now, and the successful graduation will be June 2020 when they submit an NIH proposal. NSF career we start in fall, and submission in July is sort of their graduation. And we have had really good feedback and success already in those academies. I've been pondering about a senior faculty research academy, but I also have to learn to manage my bandwidth. And that also has to do with retention. So that's a topic, of interesting topic, how we accomplish that. And it's not as easy as running these academies for junior faculty. We had to think and ponder what that creating an academy of leadership for senior faculty really means. And we do several grant writing workshops throughout the year, both for seed grants and also, agency specific from NIH to NEH. Delaware is close to DC, so we are successful in bringing several of the program officers from the agencies. It's an hour-and-a-half train ride. But I seriously believe that you got to bring DC to your institution. We used to have that problem in Arizona State. It was a 3-day trip for somebody to come from DC, and that was a challenge. So you have to figure out how to overcome those challenges. Because once they are here, then they are captive audience, right? Then you can do all the show and tell that you need to. So I sort of end the formal part of the presentation with this. I don't know how many recognize Al Baghdur. He was a Renaissance artist, scientist, engineer, because there were no silos of disciplines. So I like to showcase this picture for a couple of reasons. First, there was no silos of discipline. You did what you needed in your scholarship, and then you figured out a way, whether it was math, whether it was art, whether it was... So here, he's trying to learn about perspective projection of the loot onto the paper with the help of his assistant. And it's a self-portrait, right? So that's one point, is that you do whatever is needed interdisciplinarily to accomplish what you need for your scholarship that you are. Second, it's about perspective projection. Things that are far appear smaller, right? So you cannot lose the perspective of things that your institution, your discipline, your scholarship will accomplish. And it cannot be foreshortened by near-term emergencies. So you have to take a big, long, view of the world. Now Monty Python fans here. So a little bit about me. I have 3 kids. They're all flown the nest. The last one just got accepted into UD Chemie with honors. So, and there's the real boss, and there is the spoiled child that's not going to college. So I want to make a statement. So Andrea is half Navajo, and she was raised in Chilney, Arizona, on the reservation. And it's probably evident I'm from India. I came to the United States as a grad student, like many, but we both feel that this land has afforded us a great opportunity in excelling beyond our capabilities, opportunities that either my native country or the reservation would have provided her. And so therefore, we very strongly feel that we have to do what we need to afford those kind of opportunities to other underrepresented groups to be successful. We both very, very strongly believe in that. She's much more compassionate and sweet, evident by the fact that she has taken me in. So talking about dream big, I also dream, but my knee cannot take that bracing the left leg and hit 350 yards. That's not me on the right, but one should dream big. So I'll close with some thoughts. Chase ideas and dollars will follow. I seriously believe in that. Money does help. Feed the children and shine your stars. So the children are the junior faculty. It'd be nice, but that's not how it works. Thank you very much.
We can open it up for now questions. Once again, for those on the live stream, you can just text me or actually email me. We'll cover that. But Lori has the microphone, and we're open to any questions. We'll do Megan first, and then we'll touch her back.
I appreciated your diversity statement there at the end. More specifically, President has reiterated campus priorities for improving diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus within the last few weeks. And in terms of the metrics, the faculty diversity is really the critical, one of many critical issues, but probably the one that looks the worst on paper. How would you, as VPR, work towards improving faculty diversity, equity, and inclusion within the research and scholarship enterprise?
That's a great question. As I mentioned, VPR generally has some carrots. And so, as I explained in our answering the same question earlier in our meeting, one has to look at where the gaps and shortcomings are in different disciplines or different units, because it's not a universal. And I use the example of our chemistry department at UD, where we hire superstar women chemists. And so you can't just take a blind view of, one size fits all. And where VPR can work with unit leaders is, for example, in recruitment and hiring, by helping with some startup packages, perhaps, getting teaching releases so that those folks have time for doing scholarship, that otherwise they may be overburdened with teaching loads or not having enough release time. Another example, when I was a faculty, this is several years ago, one of my colleagues wanted extension of the tenure clock because she was pregnant and she was going to go have a baby and take a year off. And we didn't have any formal policy, and I argued strongly in favor of that all the way up to the provost's office that we need to be inclusive and adaptive to things of that nature and not just have one-size-fits-all P&T criteria and flexible for that faculty to get that benefit would come back even stronger loyalty to the institution than any other faculty. So I think there are a variety of ways where VPR can be the not the originator, but a catalyst or a sweeten the pot to either recruit, retain, or even, I would argue sometimes, some universities have adopted a mini sabbatical capability where after 3 years you're able to take 6 months off to energize your research and scholarship. So those are maybe some of the ways that I would work with the unit leaders to adapt and adopt policies for achieving those things.
Using your NIST Nimble grant
Yes.
as an example, so I'd like to know, you have been at UD for 3 years now. So what pieces were already there in terms of manufacturing, and what did you do to bring that grant to UD, which is like you're listed at 230 million. So I would consider that as huge. So what is your contribution to bringing that to UD?
That's an excellent question. So we had a star, Kelvin Lee, and when I joined in summer, they had submitted the initial proposal. It went through 3 rounds. So I came in really at the second round. And second round, we needed to round up a lot of industry partners. So 2/3 of that 230 million is supposed to come from membership from the pharmaceutical. So I worked with Kelvin and Kelvin's team and the research. Then we submitted the second round of proposals. It was a huge endeavor, several hundred pages of detailed proposal that was done. And then in the final round, you had so down select, those teams had a one-on-one with NIST leadership, a presentation. So again, we went through a series of mock, we invited several industry leaders and academic leaders to come do. So Kelvin and his team did not know who they were presenting to, and we did over a day and a half of that mock exercise and trying to beat up from every little angle. So that was, I helped organize that. And then finally, once we probably got down to 2, they had to make the selection. They made a visit to UD, and so we had to put up a huge show and tell and production to make the final convincing arguments. Then there was significant amount we raised about 12 million commitment from the state of Delaware governor's office to support that activity. And there was a lot of behind the scene work with Senator Coon's office and they can't actively lobby, but they have influence, and that's one of the things that the research office has been very active. We have very good access to our congressional leadership in putting forth our priorities and stuff like that. So there was a lot of behind the scene work, to make these things happen.
Okay, AR, I have a question from the live stream, and it says, what initiatives did you do at UD to engage local or regional industry? And did you start any type of consortiums or help to start any of these at UD?
No consortium, but I did help start the Data Science Institute, which by very nature of it, we have some banks, so JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America, they are part of what I'm helping the director of the institute is to build that sort of a consortium type of activity. If you can think of Nimble as a built-in consortium, then you can call that, because it's a membership-driven. Big pharmaceutical companies are doing $1 million a year, and then it's a gradation of that. But I don't actively run that. Nimble is sort of spun off as a separate 503c organization. But as DuPont has fractured and floundered, Chemours is one of the companies that risen from it. We have successfully brought them to have their research headquarters on our Star campus, and we have a seed grant mechanisms. I'm working with another company to, they want a consistent pipeline of ideas, and so I said I'm working with them to create a seed grant funding mechanism, say about $500K a year, that will convince faculty to take their million ideas, that come to them, to actually bench to prototype, then they will have a path to commercialization. So those are some of the things on the industry side that, and we're, coming to Delaware from Arizona, I had to learn a lot of new things. I was not, there's a lot of DuPont culture there and DuPont spinoffs. So I'm slowly learning and making those connections with the local company. It takes a little bit of time. But we now have FMC engaged, we have Gore engaged, we have Chemours engaged, and Adhesives and some of the other companies.
Hi, I have a question on startup packages, because you've alluded to we have to make investments, especially strategic investments in certain areas through either having to align with department and college goals. So that brings into question the return on investment, and I'm going to factor it into STEM versus non-STEM. What are your thoughts and feelings about what the return on investment should be in STEM areas, which is more, I guess, quantitative, and the non-STEM areas, or do you think they should be quantitative as well? So just broad thoughts, because it's a big question for me.
So since you ended with a me, would you tell me who you are and what department are?
Yeah, George Ricciardo in chemistry.
Okay. So I won't dwell too much on the STEM side because it is quantitative, and you have the classic metrics of publications, impact factors, grants, et cetera, PhD students graduated, and so on and so forth. This is a debate that goes on in every university, and folks feel that there is a dichotomy where there's arts and humanities, and then there is the STEM side of it. But what I would say is this: every society, discipline, thematic society is built of their peers, right? And the peers define what success is. So you have Pulitzer Prize, you have similar prizes and honors in arts, a variety of arts, and so and then you have federal agency grants in the STEM, but then you have Pew Foundation and Sloan Foundation recognizing your work. So I think we have to look at each of the society's metrics of how they honored success and scholarship. So if an artist has a successful installation exhibition, and I worked with a professor of sculpture a lot at Arizona State University, we always had the debate, then you have to measure it as to how their peers measure their success. You can't say 2 million DOE funding may be equivalent to a $15,000 NEA funding. You have to figure out a way to have a parity of success of scholarship. And so I would rather than impose it from the top, I would let the peers define what success is of that scholarship. And I keep saying, not doing scholarship is not an option. I mean, that's what we are committed to, that's what we get paid for, is lifelong scholarship. So how can we stop doing scholarship? And if you do scholarship, then you want to disseminate that scholarship, then you want to be recognized with that scholarship. And if you do good scholarship, then I do believe that you would be recognized with that good scholarship. And let the metrics, local metrics speak for themselves. And on the STEM side, it's easy, parents, grants, so on and so forth. So.
Questions?
So one thing that I noticed looking back through your CV and it came up again here is state investment in research. That Delaware seems to be actively investing in the research enterprise at UD, or at least statewide. How can you build upon that model? Because that's something that we're maybe just seeing the beginnings of here in Oklahoma.
So that's a great question, and a major shift from when I was in Arizona. I recall I was writing a DOD proposal, and I wanted to get a letter of support from Senator Kyle and McCain at that time. And if you are followers of congressional politics, I did get a letter, and it was a negative letter because they were so afraid of promoting. That's not the case in Delaware, so we have excellent leadership. We had a really great governor while, last 3 years I was there. This one, we're having some trouble getting that kind of investment. But being a small state helps, and being an R1 university helps in making that case. But the case in every way you have to make, and you have to do the sales job, and this is the responsibility of the president, the VPR, the provost, anybody who goes to Dover, which is where the state legislature is, to say how UD is making an economic and social impact in each of those constituents, areas, the legislators' areas or region. And if you make that argument, they care less about what R1 University and what Carnegie says, right? They care about what you are doing in for their constituents. And if you are able to successfully make that case, whether it is startups, whether it is underrepresented groups, bringing them and changing the lives, and so on and so forth, whether it is drug addiction, and the things that you're trying to make, that's why I say economic and social impact. And if you are able to sell that and then show that your $12 million investment is going to attract multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical companies to come and be part of this consortium, they can figure it out, what the job growth is going to be, what this, and they figure it out that yes, it's a worth investment to make. So fundamentals of sales, pound the pavement, knock on the doors, and convince that you are working for them. One of the things that I've heard back lately is that there's a feeling in our legislature and governor's office that they work for UD, not UD work for them. So, this is part of messaging, PR, all of that stuff that you have to make sure that we really, it's OPM, we are working because they pay our salaries, and so we are benefiting the state. And if you do that in the right way, I think then it makes it a simpler argument. Of course, it helps you're not in California where there are, gazillion UCs already competing for the same dollars and, attention and so on and so forth. Yes, sir. Would you identify yourself or?
I'm in biology, Art Berkowitz. So you said within STEM it's relatively easy to quantify research success, but even within biology there's dramatic variation. It's field dependent in things like how much money is necessary to carry out research, and also things like typical publication rate. So that makes me wonder, would you use a blanket approach within STEM to quantifying research success? And also, is the number one goal of the research office to increase the amount of money coming in or to increase knowledge and scholarship?
Both. It's really to increase the faculty's ability to be successful in their scholarship. Like I said, some of us are lucky that we find external patronage, right? And this goes back centuries, where artists required patronage of the kings to produce works of art or literature, right? So extramural funding is not a new thing that academia has invented, right? Some of us are lucky when somebody else pays for us to have a lab and so on and so forth. But you are right that, again, would you rather VPR define those metrics of success, or your discipline or sub-discipline define what the metrics of how to measure the success of your scholarship? So if you are in ethics of biology and stuff like that, I'm trying to find a way to get back to one of the slides. But anyhow, and I would argue that that's why P&T committees are local, right? So because you define what your success is. Patents might be important in engineering, but they may hold no sway in biology, perhaps. In medicine, yes. So it depends how you measure success. But that's why we have some level of impact factor of the journals and the citations and so on and so forth. How do you? Not every article carries the same value. If you publish in Science, or you publish in an online journal that is somewhere in Eastern Europe that nobody has heard of, I get regular requests to publish in those journals. I mean, and I'm taking extreme, but there is a way to measure the impact of your scholarship or what you're doing. So is it better to write 8 papers a year or 1 science paper a year? You tell me. Okay? Well, so, but if every faculty at OU was writing science papers and you only wrote 1, and your peers were writing 3, it's all relative, right? I mean, you have to let the peers decide where the threshold and the bar of success is.
We have time for one last question, and this one just came in, so I'll read it to you. And it says, if you had a fixed amount of discretionary funds, what is your strategy investing it, and what group would you support, i.e. the super, the rising, the middle class, et cetera?
Well, there is no upper bound defined on what that fixed is, so I would say tongue-in-cheek, all of the above. But if I have to answer, if you were to pin me, I seriously believe the rise of society helps when there is rise of the middle class. So invest in middle class. They bring about the biggest social economic revolution in a country. Look at India, look at China, look at other developing countries. Look at this country. After World War II, there was so much investment made in the middle class, and America became where we are right now. So that's my short answer. Thank you.
Well, join me in thanking AR. And thank you again for being here.